Okay, I see the live, so I'm going to assume that we've gone live. I know that our webinar participants are here. Hello, welcome to the WeGotchU Pod Navigator Learning Support. Thank you so very much for being with us. I am Marisol Quevedo Rerucha. I am the Chief of Strategy and Partnerships for the National Parents Union. I'm also the mother to Camerina, Emilia, and Sofia, the daughter to Irma Castro and Abraham Quevedo, the grandmother to Cynthia Iliana and Isabela Luna, and the granddaughter to Camerina Rodriguez Castro, Alejandro Castro, Francisco Quevedo, and Carmen Bedoya Quevedo. Always I introduce myself in that way because it just reminds me that I'm not alone. And the honor of being in this room, in any room that I walk in, I recognize that this voice is not just my own, that it's the product of the love, the challenge, the pain of my ancestors, and also their hopes. And not only do I carry them with me and my current relatives, but also the hopes and dreams for our future ancestors. And it just reminds me and grounds me and reminds me that this work is so much bigger than me, and really not about me at all. And so I just want to honor this voice and all of those that it represents. So thank you for being with us. The National Parents Union is a phenomenal organization. We just celebrated 1 year old, our 1 year anniversary. And we very intentionally have created a space for those parents whose voices have not, are not traditionally represented in policymaking, decision-making, and legislation. We are creating a space for those voices. And those voices include single parents, single mothers, single fathers, grandparents raising their kids, foster parents, adoptive parents, parents who may have experienced incarceration, those who have experienced substance abuse, those who may be LGBTQIA, all shapes, all forms. Also our Black and Brown and Indigenous families, and those who may be low socioeconomic, to again, and really partnering with the traditionally represented voices. But it is with a lot of pride that we do this work. And it is with a lot of pride that we join with our partners to ensure that our families, our children, receive that high quality public education that we believe they deserve, not just as a civil right or a legal right, but as a human right. And one of our partners is Ed Navigator, who will be joining us. And also we have a new partner, Columbia Law School Center for Policy, Education, Research, and Leadership. So today we have Ed Navigator and CPEARL for their acronym, who will be taking us through some amazing resources for you, for our families. So they're going to share the resource, talk about application of the resources and different supports and ways that Ed Navigator is supporting their families and their parents. And then also we will have a question and answer session. So if you have questions right now or as we go, please put them in the chat. So either in the chat in the webinar, if you're participating through the webinar, or on Facebook. So I'm going to try to be navigating between both of those and to get your questions, but we are here for you and for your questions to get them answered. So I am really excited now to introduce Whitney Henderson, who is the Chief Program Officer at Ed Navigator. She's based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. She started her career as a middle school teacher and then became a principal. With her is Ramesha Johnson, who is more fondly known as Rami. And Remy, she is a navigator and manager of navigation operations for Ed Navigator. She is also based in New Orleans, and she began her career as a professional school counselor, intent on working with our marginalized, most vulnerable, most deserving students and families. And both of them are with Ed Navigator. So here we have our educational content experts, people who are practitioners and who are now helping parents navigate the world of education. Joining them is Maddie Sims, who is the director at Columbia University's Center for Public Research and Leadership. She began her career as an attorney supporting education and other nonprofit organizations, and now partners with districts, schools, foundations, and community organizations on a range of research and consulting projects. Joining Maddie is Mike, who is also, he was a fellow at Columbia University Center for Public Research and Leadership. Before joining CPRO, Mike worked to expand services for preschool students with disabilities in New York City. Mike began his career as a high school English teacher in Texas. So we have a phenomenal group of experts, of practitioners, of people who care about you and care about your kids and have really phenomenal resources to share with you. So with that, I'm going to turn this time over to Maddie and Mike, who will also be partnering with Whitney and Ramesha. And then I will see you later to talk about facilitate the question and answer session. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being with us. Maddie and Mike, you are on.
Thank you so much, Marisol, and we are so happy to be with all of you today, and so really excited to share this new resource with all of you. So in a bit, you will see a link in the chat to a page where you can access the full resource. And our hope is that this brief intro today will give you a sense of what you can expect when you dive in. And so in a moment, we will show you what the family guide looks like and walk through it. But we first wanted to provide just a minute of background on really how the guide came to be. In speaking with families, we really heard that the sheer number of tip sheets and different types of information that's out there right now, trying to help families navigate schooling during the pandemic has been really overwhelming and has left families really unsure where to focus their energy and where to focus their resources. And so with that in mind, our team set out to create what we've been really referring to as a one-stop shop resource to help families navigate the rest of the school year. So the guide provides a structured way for families to think about how to support each individual child. Inside, you will find vetted tips, resources that come direct from parents and caretakers. In other words, these are the resources that other families are currently using to support their children and make their lives a bit more manageable. I want to emphasize right at the start that the guide is not intended to give you a million things to do. We heard families loud and clear that this really just isn't what families need right now. On the contrary, it's really intended to help all of you both identify a couple new steps you might want to implement, but just as importantly, celebrate all of the countless ways that you are already supporting your child and really looking out for your entire family's well-being during what's admittedly a very challenging year. And so before we dive in, I'll just note that I and my colleagues are so grateful to the many, many families, family support organizations, educators across the nation who really contributed their words of wisdom to this guide, and without whom the guide would never have come to fruition. And so with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague, Mike, who's going to walk through for a couple minutes how to use this exciting new resource. And he'll also pull in our friends from Navigators to add some additional tips and ideas that they have.
Great. Thanks so much, Maddie, for that introduction. And thank you again, Marisol, for including us in this very important work. And we're just so excited to show you this resource and give you a quick overview of how to use it, and then also what you'll find inside. So as Maddie mentioned, you can access the guide by clicking the link in the chat. Thank you, Colleen, for posting that. The guide is organized around 3 pathways that speak to the different things families are doing right now to support their children. The first pathway is designed for families who are working primarily as a family unit to help their child participate in school through hybrid or remote learning. The second pathway is designed for families who are working closely with other families to support their children together. And the third pathway is for families who are looking for something other than their current school setting, for example, by starting to homeschool or looking to change schools. From this page in the guide's introduction, you and your family can jump straight to the pathway that makes sense for you. If you're thinking about different pathways or you're not sure which one makes the most sense for your family, the introduction also includes a resource to help you weigh your options and make that decision. For today, I'm going to show a little preview of Pathway 1. That's the pathway for families who are really working as a family unit primarily, but know that all of these pathways are organized in the same way. So this can give you a sense of how to use the guide and what you'll find inside, regardless of which pathway you're on. We heard the message loud and clear from families that what they needed right now and what they're looking for is something that's useful, interactive, and user-friendly. And so we really kept that in mind and took it to heart when we were designing the guide. Each pathway begins with interactive checklists, and you'll see these at the start of pathway 1, which you're looking at now, but also pathway 2 and 3. There are a couple of different ways that you and your family can use these checklists. First, as Maddie mentioned, it's a great way to pause and recognize those things that are going well. We know that we're all stretching right now. We're all doing really incredible things to support our children. It's so important to pause and take stock of that and recognize what are those things that we as a family are doing that are working. So in each of the checklists, you can use the left column, this is the column with a smiley face on top, to identify what those are. So for example, if you and your child have a schedule in place, you should absolutely mark it in the checklist, and you want to keep doing that. We've also added that right column. This is the one with the thinking face on top. This is a place to identify those things that you may want to learn more about or want to try. These checklists are organized to help you and your family think about specific categories. The first checklist focuses on setup and routines. These provide strategies that focus on organization, providing structure, and helping you and your family manage all that's on your plate right now. The second category is learning and growing, which focuses on the academic supports. And the last category is community and connection, which focuses on helping your child connect with others and maintain positive and healthy relationships. Once you've identified a tip that you want to learn more about, you can click directly on that tip, and that will take you to a page that looks something like this. These pages are designed to provide those concrete suggestions, the things that families have told us they're actually doing that are helpful in this moment to support their children. These pages also include resources that families have found useful. These are resources that you can pull from if you're looking for additional ideas, or that you can just take and use as they are. We've also heard from families that they wanted resources for communicating with their schools. We've added some of those resources here. These are email templates provided in both English and Spanish that you can take, fill out, and send right to your school, whether that's your teacher, your principal, your counselor, or whoever the right person would be. And we're not going to dive into it, but I just want to flag that the guide also includes a list of learning programs that families have turned to support their children. We've included descriptions about each program so that you can get a sense of what would be best for you and your child. I know that's just a quick preview, but again, we encourage you to look through the resource, use the link in the chat, and really see what all is there. And just to give you a sense about some of the range of topics and strategies that you'll see. One that we've heard repeatedly and we intentionally included throughout the guide was around supporting your child's mental and emotional health. Because this topic is so important, we just want to take a moment to share some of what the guide says about supporting your child's health right now. Part of the strategies and suggestions that you'll see throughout the guide are ideas about how to help your child have fun right now. We know that's so important and such a significant piece of feeling engaged and staying motivated and feeling confident. In that learning and growing section, the academic piece, you'll also find tips and strategies about how to provide genuine, specific, and positive feedback, including for the little things that your child is doing, such as following directions or helping out around the house or getting themselves up and ready. These small affirmations, as we know, can go a long way in helping your child feel recognized and appreciated, and they can also strengthen your relationship. Two specific resources that I want to call out, and we'll drop these in the chat if you don't mind supporting with that, Colleen, are resources about helping your child recognize their growth and progress, especially when they don't see it or they don't feel it. Another resource is about helping your child identify their character strengths, which is so important to their developing confidence and their sense of identity. Also in the learning and growing section, we've included resources on enrichment activities. These are activities that your child can do outside of the school day that can be fun and motivating, and also are ways to continue to pursue their interest or to volunteer or participate in extracurricular activities. Another resource that we've heard that families have absolutely loved is Outschool. And we also have a link for this that we can provide. This is a program that allows your child to sign up for online classes with real teachers and real classmates. They offer classes ranging from those school subjects like science and statistics, to electives like video game design and piano, to clubs like the Harry Potter Club. The program does have a little bit of a cost, but Outschool is offering a $300 credit right now that families can claim. I filled out the form. It's very simple. It takes about a minute. And once you do that, your child can get started. And so we'll make sure that link also gets included, but you can find that resource in the guide as well. In addition to those extracurricular activities, which can be a great way to help your child connect with peers, the guide also includes a whole section that I mentioned earlier on community and connection. And so I won't go through all of those tips, but just know that if you're looking for additional ideas, you'll definitely want to turn to that section. So at this point, I'd love to bring in our friends from Ed Navigator, who have also been thinking a lot about this issue and supporting families with helping their children their families support their children's mental and emotional health. And I'd love to ask Whitney and Rami, from your experiences, what would you add or highlight that families should know about?
I just first want to start by saying we as an organization spent so much time at the start of the pandemic to collect resources, to understand what was free and reasonable for our families, and to think about, the world, the universe out there, of all of these different, resources and content pieces that change so frequently, that it was such a relief to see what you guys in the organization have done, because so much of what we personally recommended is already bundled up. And the fact that it's bundled up and, a family can access the resource and be able to click specifically on what they need and then look through the resources as well too, is just genius. So thank you guys so much for that. And I will say that to add any additional thing to what you guys have already beautifully explained, it's just a really tough time for all families, honestly. No one we couldn't have planned for this, but here we are. And so when we think about the effects that the pandemic and remote learning are having on our kids, our children, our students' mental health, it's extensive. It's extensive. And to think about the lack of support that they're getting from healthcare providers and their schools as well too regarding the issue is also a challenge. And so one of the things that we have been telling our families is to, like, one, be open, talk to your students or your child about how they're feeling. The second thing would be, not only to have the conversation, but to validate it. Like, it's real, like to have a sense of apathy, to feel as if you're alone, to feel, a sense of depression. That is very real. So to name it, to validate it means the world to students. But then also one of the ways that families can be involved is to think through, what can I do? Like, what are some of the small things that I can do in my home? Like, naming that it's time to shut down the screens. It's time to rest our eyes and take our eyes off the screens and be a bit, more intentional about how we're using our mental capacity to get physical, taking walks as a family, going on a quick jog as a family has been really helpful. So getting physical. And then last but not least, meditating, like really centering yourself around, I just need to breathe. There's a lot that I'm taking in. And so there's a lot of free apps that we recommend as an organization too. Calm is one, Headspace is one, Stop, Breathe, and Think is another. But all of those things, or a combination of them, are things that we've been expressing to our families during this really tough time. So again, thank you guys so much for bundling it so smartly.
Yeah, one of the things that I would add too is for parents to be confident in their assessments of their students. Oftentimes, we feel like we have to do things exactly the way a school might want us to execute them, or we might lay a whole lot of pressure on our kids to do certain things because we don't want them to necessarily get stuck under the weight of like all of the challenges that they're experiencing. But I always reassure parents that I'm working with, like, you know what, sometimes it's okay to like take a day to kind of get yourself together and have a reset. Just recently, even though my child's school does social emotional learning in the morning, we had to recently change our schedule where they started actually 45 minutes earlier than what they had done under their hybrid schedule. And that took away my daughter and my social and emotional time because we would go ride bikes for like 20 minutes before school started. So I was like, one particular day when she was feeling down about that, I'm like, you know what, school, we'll catch y'all at 8:40 after y'all social and emotional learning, and we're going to take that and reinsert that into our routine. So I just, when parents are feeling like they can't do those things, like there are occasions, parents, where you can do that, and when you need to, you should.
Definitely. Thank you both so much. I think that what I wanted to also touch upon is another, as we think about mental emotional health, it's so important at all periods of the year, at all times of throughout adolescence. It's especially important during those periods of transition. And so that might be starting a new school, maybe that your family has moved, maybe you've decided to enroll in a charter school, for example, or maybe your child is switching from elementary to middle school, or getting ready already, looking forward and wondering about how that transition is going to be when it comes time to move to a new school. And so what we have done is, if you take a glance at the guide, is there's an entire pathway guide, pathway 3, that's about families making a large change, whether that is switching schools, deciding to homeschool. And we've included some resources there to help, we've called it Getting Started, and it's resources that are intended to help families think about supporting their child during this period of significant change. And so a couple of the tips that I wanted to kind of quickly mention is, first is this idea of continuing routines that have already been helpful. So you, as a parent or as a caretaker, know your child. You know what's been working well. You know what's been working a little less well. And so even though your child might be going to a new school, keeping in mind all of those sort of habits that you've created with your child that have been supportive is really important. The other thing that I think we've talked to a couple families about is the fact that even though you might not be able to take that new school tour that you would like to take during a typical year, there's actually oftentimes virtual tours available that are offered by the school, either on their website or on their Facebook page. And so reaching out to an administrator or a teacher at the new school and finding out about that can be a great way for your child to feel a little less nervous, get a visual associated with the new environment, and start to really picture themselves in that new community. And so I did want to sort of open it up to Whitney and Rami, if there's any other kind of things you've been hearing or thinking about related to those school transitions.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I think one additional thing that I would think about, in addition to the virtual tours, which is absolutely right. Like a lot of schools, we see those popping up, and it gives families a really good chance to see the inside of schools. To, obviously you can do a website deep dive to understand the school culture a bit better, to see the course offerings and all of that good stuff. But another thing that we will recommend is talking to current families. Tap into your own personal network. That could be church, that could be, the local YMCA that you go to, the gym, and just see if there's anyone who that attends those schools as well too. If that is the case, you'll be amazed at the wealth of knowledge that that family may have, particularly regarding their experience, but then also just the overall quality of the school. So definitely want to encourage that. And then one of the things that we have been telling parents to be mindful of is we often share with our families, look, here's how your school is performing this year. We actually, across so many websites, don't have current up-to-date data, because many schools weren't evaluated at the end of last year because the state test was canceled. And so you probably, if you see any data regarding how schools were performing and achieving, that data is probably 2 years outdated now. And so just be mindful of those limitations when you're thinking about, the quality of school that you want your kids to be attending. And then finally, what we have been encouraging families to do is also think through, what are the safety issues that make you comfortable related to these new schools and the transitions? Are they up to date with their ventilation systems? Do they have very clear policies on how kids will, maintain their distance, and all of those things? The front office should be able to answer. If you get pushback from any, front office staff to say that, we haven't thought about it, or we're not sharing that currently, that definitely is a red flag, because many schools right now have remote models and also in-person models. And so if they haven't thought about it, that is definitely a flag. But to all of the families who are definitely with children who are transitioning, there's a ton of things to consider, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. And I think definitely use your resources in other people and websites and organizations like the three of ours, excuse me, to really help guide you and usher you through that process.
Yeah, and I'll co-sign that. And as well, I see in the comments about including students in participating. That is something that's really big that I've always pushed, not only in my own family, but with other families. Like my daughter has attended all of her parent-teacher conferences, since she was little, just so she can see that her teacher and I are aligned, and that, and also give her a space to reflect on like her own learning experience. She's applying for high school this year. So similar to the Shay in the comments, my daughter attended all of the virtual tours and open houses that we were able to attend. And she had formulated her own questions and was able to ask them, along with hearing the questions that I also had for administrators. And then another thing too, I also recommend for kids and families who are transitioning is like, as much as you can allow your child to have an active role in that transition, maybe at an earlier age, it might be they're picking out their color pencils that they want or their color pencil box, up into like high school students who are actually having more of an active choice in the actual program that they're going to. Just any way that you can include your student and have them have that buy-in and a little bit of control helps with transitions.
And I'm gonna jump in, because one of the other things I think that Shay had said, so we have this running both in the webinar and then also on Facebook Live. So you're not able, unfortunately, to see all the comments on both. But one of the things that Shay said that I think is really important is she talked about, taking her son to a high performing school, and it was beautiful, but he felt like he told her it wasn't the school for him. He felt a sadness there. And her point with that is you also have to listen to your heart and really listen to your instincts and make a decision based on that. We did have a question, and I know that Maddie, you answered it, but I want to make sure that we get it answered for our Facebook Live audience as well. And that was from Natasha, who is in our webinar. She said she had thought she had heard about the resources for homeschool, but she didn't see it in the guide. So Maddie, I'll go ahead and let you answer that. And I think if also Whitney or Ramesha, if you could share any other homeschool resources you have.
Definitely. Thank you so much for asking about that. So we do definitely have a section on homeschooling in our Pathway 3 guide. So as Mike mentioned earlier, we've tried to, based on what we were hearing from families, organize the guides around the pathway that we were hearing were most common for families. And so Pathway 3 is geared exclusively to families that are trying to make a large change, whether that change is homeschooling or whether that change is trying to find an alternative school to the one that their child is currently enrolled in. And so in the homeschooling section, there's a lot of information about helping your child really figure out a routine that works for them and that works for you. And that might look very different than the type of schedule and routine that they were following in school. We also have linked in the guide additional resources from the Homeschooling Legal Defense Association. I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but Mike, do you remember what the acronym is? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I think it's the Homeschooling Legal Association. It's HSLA, yeah.
Exactly, and they have provided a lot of wonderful resources that are very family friendly to help you really understand the actual steps you need to take, because we heard from families that it can definitely be a bit overwhelming to even kind of be sitting there thinking about, I know I want to do homeschooling at home, but I don't know the steps that I need to take. Who do I have to reach out to? What requirements do I have to comply with? And so those resources in the guide lay it out in pretty sort of simple detail, the 4, 5, 6 steps that families would have to take. And definitely I see a comment here that each state's laws and process is different. For those of you who are on Facebook, we had a comment here in the webinar, and that's such an important point. And the great thing actually about the resource that we linked in the guide is that it links you to a 50-state map. And then depending on which state you're in, you can click on the state that you and your child are in, and it'll bring you to guidance that the association put out specifically for your state. So that's a really wonderful point, Shay. Thank you so much for flagging that. Mike, is there anything else that you wanted to add about the homeschooling section in the Pathway 3 guide?
Just one quick note, and this was also mentioned in a comment I saw in the chat, and that's really that with homeschool you have even more flexibility, and you really can shape it, and it does not have to look like school. And what we've heard time and again from families who do homeschool is that you shouldn't try to replicate school in every way, and this really is an opportunity to explore your child's interests and passions even more than they might explore them in a normal school setting. And so we do have some guidance for getting started, but we also link to some other great homeschooling resources to help you and your family figure out the right way to structure homeschooling.
Marisol, you may be on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was not, sorry about that. Sorry about that delay. I wasn't sure if Maddie and Mike and Whitney and Ramesha, if you had finished going through all of the components that you wanted to make sure to highlight.
We're happy to answer other questions about the guide, but would love to dive into any other additional questions that you're seeing, Marisol, and we can of course reference our resources in response to those questions as well.
Awesome, fantastic. So one of the questions that we received on Facebook has to do with the transitions, when you started talking about transitions. And what recommendations do you have for families who are getting ready to transition their child to college during this pandemic time? Because things are very, very different. So that was the question, but kind of my thinking, I'm wondering, you know, like everything is so different than things were before. So what suggestions or recommendations are you making for parents who have either junior or senior grade level students?
Sure. So I'm happy to start off, and then definitely want to hear from our friends at Navigators as well. So I think that a couple of things, we could not agree more that the transition is a very unique one at that stage. There is a lot of different considerations, and also it's really challenging because we have been conducting a lot of focus groups with high schoolers, and really hearing that there's an element of a little bit of sadness that they're not sure whether they're really going to be able to have that in-person experience. And so I think one of the things that we've been hearing is really important is going back to where we started, which was with the mental and emotional health. Acknowledging those feelings, finding ways to talk with your child about both the excitement they may be having as well as the apprehension. And so we've definitely linked some resources in this guide about help with sort of helpful conversation starters if you're not sure if your child's kind of ready necessarily to open up, as well as ideas about if your child's not wanting to talk to you, perhaps there's other caring adults that are in your child's network, either via school or elsewhere, that would be a good resource. So that's definitely one thing, is really just having those conversations about how they're doing and the type of support that they need. I'll also say the other thing we heard from families is really just reaching out to the high school itself, whether that's the teacher or the guidance counselor, and making sure that you as a parent or as a caretaker are aware of the resources and the events that are taking place. One of the unexpected silver linings of this time is all of these events are now being live streamed, whether it's via Zoom or Facebook. And that means that we've heard from actually principals and teachers that they've had families say, you know what, it's wonderful. I can actually log into this college night while I'm doing my grocery shopping, and I have it on my phone streaming, or while I'm folding my laundry or looking after another younger child. So I think just making sure that if you're not hearing from your school about those events, not being afraid to just reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in attending any sort of events or having conversations, and then really the support is there, and is one of the silver linings, again, has been that it in some ways is easier to access now that everything has been remote. And I'll say one quick thing, and then want to sort of open it up to Remy or Whitney, is that one of the promising things we've also heard is that principals have said that this is, a couple principals we spoke to said this is a change they want to carry forward post-pandemic. So they said we never used to have these events open online, but even when we're, God willing, all back together in person, we still want to continue this practice so that families have that flexibility.
Yeah, the majority of the families I support happen to be in high school too. So I think I can answer this two different ways. I think there's a certain set of things that kids in 9th, 10th should be thinking about, and a certain set of things that kids in 11th, 12th should be thinking about. With one of the families that I talked to last night, I asked, we actually have a relationship, or I have a relationship with the actual student. And so the student calls me, we chat from time to time, but I asked her, have you had a conversation with your high school counselor this year? And the answer was unfortunately no. And it just broke my heart because this is such a directional time for her to be thinking about what she wants to do post high school. And as we know, so much is on the line and so much matters. And so one of the first things that I was able to do was to actually connect with that counselor to help them set up time for them to speak. And that doesn't have to be me, that could be any family, any parent can do that, or family member can do that, to say, actually, what's the email address? Let's actually get on the line, or what's the phone number? Let's get on the line, because you know, in cases like this, their expertise is invaluable, but if the connection is not happening, then there's a lot of lost time there. And so that's one. When it comes to kids who are already seniors, we've been really pressing get FAFSA done. One thing that we've been seeing across the board, especially in the US, is that college applications are way down this year than they've ever been before. Not a lot of kids are thinking about college right now, one, because the financial implications of that are really, really challenging. And so we've been saying, listen, the government is going to be going through a lot of different shifts in the next few months. One of the things that you can do is definitely stay on top of the financial game that is happening. And so FAFSA is definitely one thing we've been promoting. Connecting with financial aid offices too is another. And so to your point, Maddie, there's so many things that colleges and universities are doing in terms of setting up Zooms. And it used to be competitive at one point where it was just like, you can, if you were a student who actually reached out to a financial aid counselor or attended a webinar or something, you would get these points that would promote you higher and will put you closer to actual admission. Now, because it's open to everyone, I do encourage, or it always has been, but now that many people are looking at the options of participating in some of these college and university webinars, then that definitely is something that they should be thinking about too. To the previous point that we'd already mentioned, virtual tours for college have already been a thing before they were a thing for high schools and middle schools. So see what you can see on campus. Look at actual dorm rooms to see if your student can imagine themselves there. Think about the programming, the sports, think about the extracurricular activities. All of those things are going to matter, particularly as it relates to mental health. So I want to overemphasize that. Having your child be in a space and place that is affirming to them, that is welcoming to them, means more now than ever. And so all of the things that we may have glossed over in the past, we can't now. Even the types of food offerings, even if they're addressing students by the pronouns that they prefer, all of those things are so important. So to end and close, I don't know, Rami, if you have any other things that you want to mention too. The final thing to be thinking about is a lot of schools are waiving ACT and SAT. And they're saying, many kids are taking the Common App, or not taking, they're completing the Common App, which gives them access to, over 100 colleges at once, completing just one application. And so because ACT and SAT may be waived in certain states, then a lot of kids are really taking the opportunity to be a bit more thoughtful about the college applications. And so taking the time, being thoughtful about, what I want to focus on as it relates to my college application. No, I'm not playing soccer right now. No, I'm not in this club because it's not being offered in my particular school. So what can I really promote about myself and who I am that gives me leverage to be able to be accepted into this university or this college and space is going to be more important than ever. So those are the things that we think about when we're helping students who are in high school. Oh, one last thing, don't underestimate the recommendation process. Who is it in your community or your schools who can vouch for the person that you are? Because again, when I heard that you haven't heard from your counselor at all this year, I'm just thinking that the accessibility may not be there. So making sure that kids have people who can vouch for them and write those recommendations is going to be super clutch.
Yeah, in addition to that, the one thing I will add that I think we often take for granted for our students that are transitioning to college is like their ability to live on their own. And so one of the things that we share, even though it's used for a lot of children who are in like foster families or under state custody, is those independent living skills checklists, because you can assume that your child knows how to wash their own clothes, but when they get on their own, like maybe their brain farts and they don't remember. But just making sure like they have the ability to navigate like the basic activities that are typically done, you know, by parents more often, even as they get ready to graduate, that they will not have to remember to take on their own. So just a quick Google search, independent living skills, should come up with really easy checklists for you to review with your student.
Okay, so we have another question from Facebook. I'm really and this, I don't know if this is your lane, I'll be honest, but I'm gonna ask the question. So the parent said, I'm really disappointed about the vaccine information that's being provided, not just by my doctor, but by my student school. Do you have any information that can help us navigate?
We've been talking about this lately, huh, Rami? I think so many families have that question. And I actually think, you know, because the different versions of the vaccine are available, and then also new variants and all of these things, there's still so much knowledge out there about them, and about, you know, the effects and all of these things. And I think schools are just miles behind right now in terms of figuring out what do we actually do. You know, the best thing to say is like, let's give them a couple of, a month or two to kind of figure it out and just think about how they want to create policies or be clear on what their actual policy is, because I imagine there are going to be some families who do not want their children to take it, some teachers who also are very vocal right now and saying that they don't want to either. And so what we can predict, because people have that right, is that that's going to create a bit of a divergence where there still are going to be people who are going to be at home learning, and there are going to be people who are at school learning. I think one of the things that I think about for that is we're in it for the long run in terms of having split populations of groups and kids. And I imagine a world in which all school is remote in the near future. And so, you know, the best thing that I can say right now, because we haven't seen any schools from the hundreds of schools that we actually have communication with, no one is yet thinking about the vaccine, but I would love to touch bases with the person who asked that, because I love when we do figure out to, you know, be able to call them or email and just talk through some of their worries.
Yeah, too, and I think part of the challenge is that there's still very little information about the effects of the vaccine on children. Like I was listening to NPR this morning, and they were talking about like how the pregnant women and women who are breastfeeding were excluded from the initial studies. So like even, you know, trying to protect them and having them get vaccinated is also a challenge. So I will echo what Whitney's saying. Like we just have to hope that information or better information comes out soon, because it's the one that we're all grappling with.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add one quick note, and that is, as we've been talking to families about generally kind of looking forward to that 3-month, 6-month, 9-month period, I think as evidenced by the question, there's so much uncertainty right now. And so what we've been hearing that has been helpful is really kind of preparing that there might be, whether or not your school right now is fully in person or in a hybrid setting, knowing that there's a real possibility that hybrid learning, where students are transitioning back and forth between in-person and remote learning, is a real possibility. And I think that, well, when you think about that, you have to think about those transitions. And so for a student, especially younger students, having learning in person one day and then at home the next day can be disruptive without the right set of sort of setup and routines. And so in the guide, we've linked a couple of different resources that can help you think about how to recreate, sort of as to the greatest extent possible, a good learning environment, creating a learning space at home to really try to minimize some of those disruptions that are inevitable when those transitions are occurring.
Does the guide or in the work of a navigator do you include how to really become an advocate for not just your child's social and emotional health and well-being, but also like their physical health and their mental health? Because those, I think sometimes we have a tendency to silo our efforts or our thoughts on things. So do any of you have any specific resources for supporting parents in really advocating for their child's health?
I'll start here and speak to our work. Maddie, feel free to chime in. And of course, Whitney and Rami would love to hear your thoughts as well. Just in the guide itself, there are a couple of things I would point you towards. First, and I mentioned it but didn't pull them up, but we include specific resources for how to advocate and communicate challenges and needs that your family has, not only related to the academic piece, but also to the social emotional piece, to speak up if you notice that your child is perhaps in distress, is perhaps down, is perhaps feeling apathetic, and we provide that resource, hopefully trying to lower the threshold and help and just giving you something you can pick up and use and send to the school counselor, send to the school social worker, or whoever the teacher, whoever the right person may be, in those initial communications. So we do include some of those resources. The other resources I would point you towards come from an organization that we worked closely with, called Learning Heroes, which provide a number of resources for how to have conversations with teachers that are strength-based, that identify your child's strengths, and that bring your child into the conversation. Rami, this is a point you mentioned earlier about your own children, and help them advocate for themselves and develop their advocacy skills in an age-appropriate way, of course. And they also provide questions and points that you will want to raise with your child's teachers in school, to learn more about what is your child actually learning, what are they actually receiving, and how is the school meeting their needs, and if not, what can be done to help your child holistically. So those are some of the resources I would point you towards that exist in the guide, but definitely want to open it to others.
That's the one. We love Learning Heroes too. We saw that come up quite a few times in the guides, especially around the readiness check, which we use too with our families. And so that one is incredibly helpful. When it comes to our families, we usually want to be around for when it's time to escalate. And so when families haven't gotten the answers that they need, and they're just like, I need either your capacity or like you physically to show up at the school and just ask like, what is going on? I haven't had any responses from my calls, from my text messages, from my emails. And I really would love to know what is available within the school, if not the district, for kids to be able to have a mental health counselor, someone to actually talk to, someone, and you mentioned, sorry, Marisol, you mentioned being physical, like even having conversations with a PE teacher that kids, you'll be surprised the teachers that kids miss. And so, are there any routines or sets or reps that this kid can go throughout the day? What does that look like? I know that YouTube has given us a new universe and world to look at things. We actually love a guy named PE Joe. We talk about him all the time, but PE Joe is really good. But there's also like cosmic yoga for the younger kids. There's so many resources out there. So definitely YouTube, definitely look into, if not you, who is someone who can escalate for you or with you? Like if you need help calling your school, or you just feel like you're unheard, not listened to, that can be a friend of yours. Somebody is always willing to be that person, trust me. So definitely see who it is who can be, fighting on your behalf. And then the other thing I would say is physical. It slipped my mind, but it will come back. But Rami, I know you have a counseling background. Anything you want to add?
Sure. I think too, and this is more for like when you're in person, when kids go back to in person versus being at home. Because of course, when you're at home, you have control over the environment. So I was taking care of, I can give you a quick example. I was taking care of my, a little cousin of mine who was diagnosed with ADHD. he is a bouncy ball. Like, he did not like to keep still. So we had to figure out ways to allow him to burn that energy while not being disruptive for the class. So that just meant us being creative and thinking outside the box. So trying I know a lot of times they use the Velcro strips, or they have like a rubber band that kids can kind of bounce on their chairs. Things that don't cost a lot of money or not resource heavy, that you can offer and recommend. When we started doing virtual learning, he preferred to stand up. And one of his things was that when he was really excited, like, he couldn't contain it and would just like want to like cheer on the kids or cheer on himself. But at home, he was able to do that because we were on mute. So basically, if you can imagine ways and innovate and implement ways to help your child be able to express themselves physically or move around physically, that is in a way that can be a compromise between you and the teacher, go for it. A lot of things that we do with families is sometimes parents want to say something but don't know what to say. So then we might help them craft the language similar to like your templates. Other times we just need to be there. So parents know what to say, but would prefer us to be copied on the email or attending the meeting, not necessarily saying anything, but just our presence alone kind of makes schools pay attention. And then, like, to Whitney's point, like, when we have to escalate and step in, like, we will definitely escalate and step in with parents there, and still with putting parents in the front of the issue, so that they know, like, yes, we're here advocating, but it's coming because the parent wants us to do it, and not that it's the other way around.
Whitney, I think you put a really important comment in the webinar chat. Can you just go ahead and speak that? So I think it's really important what you shared.
Yeah, so when we touch bases with a lot of neighborhood-based organizations, they are often telling us the utilization rate is so poor, is so low. We have this free counselor, we have these free exercise classes. If you don't want to be there in person, we're offering them virtually too, and no one is taking us up on the offering. And so we know that many of these programs have been subsidized by the government in ways that benefit all of us. Some of them even have, once you participate in something, they're giving you free dinner, they're providing free breakfast. And it's just that I feel that free has been the word of the year, and that's great, and we should be taking advantage of that. But there was a second part to that I was actually typing. If you don't know where to look and where to start to find some of these, and what I was basically saying here is you won't see the quality of these offerings on a Yelp review because it's the public library or it's the YMCA. Yeah. But if you go to your Facebook groups, if you're on Facebook, explore those groups, see what other parents are talking about, and then assess the quality based on that. And you'll usually find something really outstanding that you would have just gone over your head had you not tapped into that option.
I could not agree. Oh, I'm sorry, Marisol. I was going to say very quickly, I could not agree more with Whitney, what you just shared. And I just wanted to add that we've also been learning a lot about community organizations that have actually set up learning hubs as well. So this might be an aquarium, for example, or a museum, where they're actually set up opportunities where children are able to go be supervised. Their learning is supervised by a caring adult, and then they're also able to incorporate some of those more fun activities. Maybe it's involving going to take a tour of the museum or learning about a new art project. And so definitely there are a couple resources linked in the guide that have basically overviews where you can click into and do a search for learning hubs in your local neighborhood. So definitely, Whitney, I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, so grateful for the search term, right? So learning hub, whatever that free yoga class, community resources, community classes, it really just takes one person trying it and then telling their friends, and or bringing their family along with them for the community resources to really blow up. And so I think just looking for it, trying it, and then spreading the word is really critical. We have very few minutes left, so I wanted to start closing us down. One question that I have is, how can people connect with you? So if there are questions, or if there's questions about what it is that we've talked about, is there a way that that we can connect with you? And I'll go to Whitney Ramesha, Maddie, and Mike.
All right, I think I saw someone drop this in earlier and we so appreciate it. I'm dropping it in again, but our Kinda Guide has a wealth of information on any topic that you can think about. It is free. We, tap into resources like yours, Maddie and Mike, which is so incredible, learning heroes. And, we try to be very thoughtful about what we're putting out there to make sure that it's relevant, to make sure that it's high quality. And so our Kinda Guide features something called Ask a Navigator. And it usually will be connecting to any of our navigators who have expertise related to your question. You can ask 50 million questions and you're going to get a response. It may take some years, but you will get the response eventually. But we love getting those questions in because we actually then publish our responses in the Kinda Guide. So please sign up for it and register. It also has dinner recipes and a lot of things that just takes your mind off all of the stress of the day and really synthesizes it all into one particular resource. You can also find us at Ed Navigator. I'm going to drop my email here because I'm more than happy to hear from you guys regarding your questions or any other things that you may need support with.
Whitney took all of my answers, so you guys can, move on.
No problem. And so for on the CPRO side, if you're in the guide, you'll see our email address at the end of all the pathway guides, which is cpro@law.columbia.edu. We've also dropped it in the chat here in the webinar. And again, we would absolutely love to hear from you, both if you sort of want to learn more information about the guide or just want to hear about the other work that's taking place related to families.
Well, and I also wanted to let everybody know that we have live now our WeGotchU Facebook group. So please join the Facebook group because everybody that is here from Ed Navigator to CPRO is in the group. So that is another great place to ask questions, to share resources. So please make sure that you join the WeGotchU Facebook group. The other thing that I just wanted to share is this is National School Choice Week. And we are so grateful to be partnered with National School Choice Week to present today our WeGotchU Pod Navigator time. Because we're not about any particular type of system. We believe in high quality public education and that families, students, parents have a right to choose, to have access and opportunity to the program that fits them, whether that's in a traditional public school, in a public charter school, homeschooling, virtual learning, whatever that platform is, magnet programs, that they have that they should have the choice for high quality programming regardless of their zip codes. So we're very proud and excited to be a part of National School Choice Week. Before we go, and we have very little time, but this is something that I think that is really critical, and we didn't talk about this, but part of the work of just being and connecting, which is what is needed so much, I think, is us also taking a moment to celebrate and honor ourselves and others. So what I'm hoping that each of us can do, and we'll go Maddie, Mike, Ramesha, Whitney, if you could name 3 things that you're proud of, and 3 things that you're proud of that you have done. Not that you're proud of, and you can't say like, I'm proud of my kids. Like, yeah, you made them, but something that you have tangibly done that you're proud of. And I'll go ahead and get started, and I'm gonna claim this one. I'm so proud of the WeGotchU Pod Navigator and the work that we're doing, so you guys can't claim that one. I'm proud to be a plant mom, and I'm very proud of the relationship that I have reestablished with my older daughters, because parenting is hard. But the relationship that I enjoy with all of my girls, it's something that we've poured a lot of work into, and I'm very proud of it. Okay, so 3 things you're proud of.
Wonderful. I love this ending. So I am proud of making time to get a little sunshine every afternoon. I feel like that is easy to let it slip by, but I'm proud of that. I'm proud of sort of stealing yours, Marisol, the new relationships I'm building with folks like the Ed Navigators team and other folks doing such important work on behalf of families. And I think I'm proud for showing up every day and trying to do the work that we're doing, which, as we all know, can be tiring sometimes, but is really important and inspiring.
I too love this ending. And Thank you so much for having us do this. 3 things I'm proud of. One is this work. I think I'm proud of the relationships we've developed, not only with educators and schools and institutions, but also with families, and the ways we've been able to capture their voice and capture all that they're doing well and help them recognize all that they're doing so well right now. Proud of helping my family from far away through virtual events and helping and being there for milestones even when we can't physically be in the same place. And then also proud of being able to take those mental breaks that we talked about earlier and just disconnect every day and unwind and not be so taken in by the screen all the time.
Ramesha.
Oh, this was tough. Okay, so I am proud that my daughter and I got her high school application submitted on time, which was one of them is for a selective art school, and trying to get her to prepare that audition, and the little blurb about her interest in the school was really hard because she's really shy. The second thing I'm proud of is that mental health has kind of been our theme, and I had been struggling for like the last couple of months, as many folks have been, but I have been able to talk to my therapist, and I am on an upward trajectory, so things seem to be going really well about that, with that right now. And then the last thing is, like, I'm really proud of the work that Navigator continues to do, because as a counselor, it was very difficult being inside the space and having all the restrictions that we sometimes face, being able to work with families and students in a way that we are now able to do.
Thank you, Whitney.
Yeah, it's always hard going last because I'm going to repeat all of that probably, but I'm so grateful for how this space is evolving. We are now into like 3-4 webinars at this point, and to see the growth has been really incredible. I can't thank CPRL enough. Your resource is incredible. And I also see one of my families here. Shout out to Russ and Nora. I'm so glad you guys were able to attend. So that's one. I think that was a lot, but that's one. I'm also recommitting myself to just being physical. And so that for me has been a blessing. And then finally, like you said, Mike, naming when to stop. Our days are long, our work is hard, it's challenging. Everyone's going through a really tough time. Saying that this is it for me, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, just I would work into midnight if I could, but being able to say I'm stopping right now is honoring myself. And so I've been grateful for that.
Thank you all for that. I know we went a little bit over, but I just think it's so important. And I also think it's something important to do with our families. So thank you. We will be back. We will be releasing our next We Got You Pod Navigator date early next week. And I want to thank you for joining us. And please know that I'm proud of you and proud of everything that you do. If you get a chance, drop it in the comments, 3 things that you're proud of. But also we want you to know that you're loved and cared for. Look at all of these amazing organizations that are doing this work for you and your kids and your families. And we will continue to partner to provide you the support that you need. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.